Good morning. My name is Seth, your Metro Detroit real estate expert. And with me, as always, your mortgage expert, Steve Frost. How are you today, Steve?
Fabulous.
Good deal.
Today's a green day in the mortgage world, so we're happy.
Absolutely. So we had a good Fed meeting over the past couple of days, which Steve will cover. I'm just going to cover a couple housekeeping things on the real estate market side. Inventory is still below typical levels. We just got April's numbers back, and we ended up in third place for lowest inventory of all time. Last year, I think, was second, and I think 2020, don't quote me on that, was in second place, and then we just hit third place in 2024.
That's for
Two
inventory available. So we're on the right. We're getting better
We're getting there. We're getting there.
moderately.
Slowly but surely. We had
The
a two
pace of
percent
getting
decrease
worse
in
is slowing.
2% decrease in mortgage purchase applications over this past week. So things are slowing down just a tad, not too much. That's mostly because just these past couple of weeks we've had quite a bad couple of weeks with rates. But we just got some good news, which Steve is going to hit on right now, right, Steve?
Yes, sir. So this was a really, really heavy economic week, and it always is the first week of the month. And so it kind of it precedes the first Friday of the month, right? So end of April, in this case, very beginning of May. So we had three really, really big economic things that happened. So one, we had the Fed meeting on Wednesday, a 2-day meeting. But we're really looking for, I mean, there's so much intel and insiders and news and leaks and all this stuff. You kind of always know what the Fed's going to do. They really let the markets know intentionally. But what we look for a lot is the Fed press conference after where Jerome Powell gets away from his prepared speeches and kind of talks about some of the things the Fed are doing. So one, he said that, based on the stickier inflation and the strong job market, that there are no longer any rate cuts on the or any rate hikes on the table, which finally was him solidifying like we are done with this hiking cycle, which could be viewed as a pivot comment or something that was viewed as good for interest rates. So that was good. The other thing, and then this is a technical thing, and it's I'm not going to go really deep into the weeds on this, but what happens is the Federal Reserve buys 10-year treasuries. So we talk about the 10-year all the time. And we're saying, mortgage rates trade between, really 1.75% and 3% over the 10-year. So lately it's been closer to 3%. So if the 10 years 4.5, mortgage rates are 7.5, right? And so the reason they are high though is because there's a lot of treasuries in the market. Because there's so much debt being issued by our government. And then the Fed, who also has $1 trillion balance sheet full of these treasuries, was once these treasuries matured, the Federal Reserve would make what they make for holding that. So they would gain interest and they would make a yield or a return. And then they were letting these treasuries roll back into the market for other people to buy. And so what that was doing is it's creating a surplus. Not only are we issuing all this debt, but the Federal Reserve was letting all this fly off their balance sheet up to $60 billion a month. And so what the Federal Reserve said is in the meeting, they said, we're also going to limit our roll off, letting them roll off their balance sheet to 25 billion. So anything beyond 25 billion, they were going to take what they made and they were going to reinvest it into the 10-year treasury. So what they're doing is they're providing liquidity in that market. They're now a $35 billion per month buyer of these treasuries, which anytime there's more people out there willing to buy them, these treasuries have to give less of a yield or less of a return. So the cost of them goes down, which means the borrowing cost for buyers is going down without the Fed actually lowering rates. So that's a sign of easing monetary policy. So we saw a little bit of a break in rates from there. We came down from about 7.5 to 7 3/8 to 7.25. And then today we got our non-farm payrolls or our government jobs number, which is also a really big one. Because people say, why do jobs matter for mortgage rates? Don't we want people to work? Absolutely. We definitely want people to work, and we do not want what we call a job loss recession, because that's what happened in 2008, right? We had a massive job loss recession. So the reason, though, that we watch this employment market so closely is because if inflation is going up, and what the Fed wants people to do is change their behavior. They want us to stop spending money, because the more money we spend and the more resilient we are to rising prices, these giant companies or small businesses, whoever it is, can continue to raise their prices and make record profits. And instead of, and even maybe not even record profits, right? Maybe they can afford the increases from producers who are also making more money now. So rather than getting consumers to change their spending habits, what the consumer can do in a really strong employment market or where there's a lot of jobs being created is they can simply go get another job or a job that pays more. So when the labor market is really ripping and raring and we're creating 250,000 to 300,000 jobs a month, people can say, look, my job at 19 bucks an hour is not cutting it. I'm going to go somewhere else and get a job at $21 an hour or whatever it might be. And they can move jobs that easily. Well, we're looking for 240 something thousand jobs and 243,000 jobs to be created in the month of April. And we only created 175,000 jobs. That is the first miss on the estimate for how many jobs we create in a very long time. And the unemployment rate ticked up from 3.8% to 3.9%. So a lot of people thought the Fed's going to hike rates. And that's why they were so happy when the Jerome Powell came out and said, we do not see any further rate hikes. And now they're saying, like, finally, the job market is starting to turn. Finally, these layoffs that we read about but aren't coming through in these data reports is starting to show up. So the market's really, really like that. We had another strong run on rates today. So probably closer to that 7%. You're probably going to see some rates a little bit under that with cost that are very manageable right around this time. So we've seen this week alone probably a 0.5% gain in mortgage rates, and it's been a nice relief. So with this gain in rates, you'll start to see it in the news in the next week or so that borrowing cost is going down a little bit. And then next week when we have this, you're going to say, well, it looks like mortgage applications were up a hair because they follow rates so closely. So it's been a really nice run. Some of the economic data is starting to soften, starting to see some cracks maybe in the economy. We missed the GDP report in the first quarter. That was totally covered up by some higher consumer spending. And now we're seeing these less job creation. And so we'll see how this impacts things going forward. But overall, as you can tell from my fervor, that we had a pretty active economic week.
Beautiful. I think it's like the first time in a few months that we've been able to deliver some good news, right?
I know, man. It's been a little bit, been a tough start to the year, but you know what? The first quarter of the year is always like this. It's we used to say, like, back when we were doing tons of refinances and stuff all the time, this is 4 or 5 years ago, like when summer happened, yeah, it's buying season, but we also called it mortgage season. That's when people started on the refinances and taking cash out and getting things going, because you'd see a little bit of a rate drop and people like, oh, I got a little bit of debt and I want a new deck and we want a pool, and you'd start seeing some of the equity come out of the houses and things like that. So it's pretty common in the beginning of the year to see that, economic data come in stronger, because there's just a ton of like changing of the goalposts and the way we measure things and seasonal adjustments and all kinds of different things happen. So this is not that out of character for mortgage rates. It's just once you've been around it long enough, you get a little bit more used to it.
Good deal. Anything else?
No, man, believe it or not, I don't have anything else for you.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you next week.
All right, dude. Have fun. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Steve.